Now, I know fine well what a lot of people will suggest too is the fact that, again, the joke about Jeremy Hunt's name is something that I'm going to avoid as best I possible, despite how smug, out of touch, and possibly by the end of this video, he will be quite a lot of other things, because according to this video, Jeremy Hunt tries to defend £100,000 a year isn't much comment. So, well, what can you expect? It's anyone. Listen, first of all, I just got to ask the question just before we begin. How many of you guys ever listened to the rock band The Saw Doctors? They were a very popular Irish rock band during the 90s, and one song in particular was called Good News, and there's a very popular lyric that it's great because it's so simple, but it makes the most sense, is that the rich just getting richer and the poor man always pays. You know what? The money has to come from somewhere, and £100,000 a year isn't just going to come from somewhere. It's got to come from it's got to come out of it's got to come somewhere. And for everyone that goes with, you can be certain there's just an equal amount who are going without. And we're about to see exactly how Jeremy Hunt can rationalize this. So, if you are a fan of Jeremy Hunt, well, you're going to have to try and break it down for me as well, because, well, go ahead. I look forward to this.
Hi guys, oh my god, can these Tories get any more out of touch with reality than this? So the Chancellor of the Exchequer, not some Tory backbencher, the frigging Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, tweeted out that £100,000 a year isn't really a high salary in the grand scheme of things. This is messed up on so many levels. Here he was on the Trevor Phillips show, engaging in mental gymnastics to explain his massive foot-in-mouth exercise. However, I still think he doesn't get why what he said was so egregious. Have a listen to this.
Do you regret tweeting that? It doesn't sound right, does it, to say £100,000 is not a huge salary?
Well, I was talking to a constituent who was pointing out to me that, what sounds like a large salary, when you have house prices averaging around £670,000 in my area, if you've got a mortgage and you've got childcare costs, it doesn't go as far as you might think. And she's right. It doesn't go as far as you might think. And that's why I want to give help to families. That's why the childcare measures are very important. We weren't able to afford to fund childcare.
If you're okay, first question I want to ask is that if you thought that childcare measures were that important, were they important during the period of 2013 when, thanks to Prime Minister David Cameron and then Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne, was it George? Yeah, it was George Osborne. They wanted to literally scrap child benefits. Was he? Why did Jeremy Hunt say anything about that then? Because I don't know if you guys have ever considered the case, ladies and gentlemen, but it sent my family into a state of fury about what the Conservatives did 10 years ago, and they still have not forgiven them. And again? He says about in my area. Well, what about the people who aren't in Jeremy Hunt's area? What about those who live in places like J-Town, one of the poorest towns in this country today? What about them? Do you know? What about This is why again for even those who are even at all interested in listening to Jeremy Hunt, it's the fact that he doesn't quite seem to understand that actually, with all things considered, he actually has it pretty well off through what he does. Now, whether you want to say it's because he's extremely talented and good at what he does, I will have to say it's either for or against. But I also like to imagine is that when you get involved in the field of politics, the decisions you make are for the greater good of the public. And one thing that is being increasingly apparent for the last 10 years is the fact that the Conservatives seem to have broken the number one rule when it comes to politics, is that you serve the people, not yourself.
For people on the highest salaries, but I was simply saying that's something I'd love to be able to look at in the next Parliament, but we can't afford to do it now.
My God, There are people who can't afford to feed their families, and Jeremy Hunt's priority, it seems, is, well, at the next Parliament, vote us back into power. The next Parliament, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it easier for people on £100,000 plus per year. Now, once again, this complete and utter
people, it would be interesting to know, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm pretty sure the people who are like on even £100,000 a year has got to be, all things considered, maybe less than 18% of the population of this country. I would say it might even be less than maybe even 14%. Because I think the average, the earnings for if everybody was in work, or at least the ones who are in work right now, for what they get paid and for whatever they do, I'd say that maybe on average people get paid something roughly equivalent to roughly about £28,000 a year. So just under £30,000 a year. And, well, even they still have the hardest time in the world to actually get on the property ladder, to actually afford to start a family, to try and, even... It's the sort of thing that has actually made me very seriously consider about whether I could even afford to start a family. Now, again, ignoring the fact that first I would need to actually have want to actually have a wife of my own, and to actually have children with her, and all the rest of it. But there's even the fact that what world would I be bringing my children into? Would I be bringing them into a world in which the people in charge are literally only after themselves and only trying to look after themselves, and saying that it's pull the ladder up, Jack, and sod the rest? That's not the sort of world I want to bring my children into. I want to bring my children into a world in which peace, love, generosity, all of these sorts of things are not only prevailing, but are openly encouraged. That's something you'll never get out of any politician, left or right wing, is the idea that peace and love and generosity mean more than anything in the world. You can't put a price on things that are special, ladies and gentlemen. And, well, it shows you just how much Jeremy Hunt thinks about money, because he doesn't even consider 100,000 to even be that special. And he has one of the most important jobs in the country. Maybe outside of, perhaps, I don't know, maybe doctors, scientists, stem cell researchers, mothers.
Connect. Not understanding that there are people who are struggling to get by, to pay their bills, to feed their families. People on universal credit, people on benefits, who are getting into debt, not because they want to build a house or buy a new car or something like that, just to pay food bills. There's a new phenomenon of people borrowing money just to pay for food. This is absolutely ridiculous in a society that's supposed to have a social safety net. Now, he talked about a number of things here. Talked about house prices. Well, why are house prices so high? Because so much money has been transferred to the wealthiest in society over the last 14, 15 years that they have bought up all the assets. And because they're buying up all these assets, it drives up the price of these assets, and it drives the price of the assets in the area, drives up the price of housing. So, this guy is a landlord himself, so he has a few...
That's another point as well, ladies and gentlemen, is that supposing I was wanting to start a family, well, I would want to have, I want to actually, have my children actually have a space to live in. You know what I mean? And it's damning, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, how on earth is anybody even meant to get on that ladder? Or how's anybody even meant to get anywhere in this world? Now, I know many of you may be asking the question, well, work harder, make money. But then again, ladies and gentlemen, that's the sort of attitude we're talking about. It's always the attitude of, you're not doing good enough. If you're depressed, then stop being depressed. Get back out there. Stop worrying about your woke and your mental health for 1 second and just get back to work. That's the attitude that this society is beginning to shape, is the fact that if you have a disability, if you are depressed, that is your fault and nobody else's, because you are unfortunate enough not to have the initiative to realize that if you realize that you were depressed, it means that you are going to go absolutely nowhere in life. I don't want to bring my children into that. Who would want to bring their kids or their loved ones into that? The idea that if there's something wrong with you, then you are doomed from the very start and you have absolutely nowhere to go in this world. I mean, that's dreadful. And I know that, again, a lot of people akin to the attitude of, we actually do care, and there's plenty of things to actually supersede to those who require extra attention. But with the way this world is going right now, we may be only going so far as to say, we'll put up a ramp just so that people can get on buses. We will give you ear reducing headphones if you think you're getting a bit too sensitive to noise. But what about the larger picture, ladies and gentlemen? It's a fucking disgrace.
Properties, he knows about this, but if people like him are buying up all these properties, it's driving up the price for everyone else, and it's driving younger people out of the market. So when house prices are up, part of the blame, not all of it, but part of the blame goes to the Tories themselves because of the policies they've put in place and because they've transferred so much wealth to the richest in society. He also talked about expensive mortgages. Well, his party is responsible directly for that. Liz Truss, with her mini budget, along with Kwasi Kwarteng, drove up mortgage prices. Now, he took over to try and bring that down or to sort that out, but his party is responsible for that. He didn't resign from his party over this. He took over. And finally, childcare costs. Well, the Tories are responsible for this as well because they're not providing enough funding.
Well, there's also the case to be had about whether or not the Conservatives will even make it to the next election, because 2 more people resigned in between the making of this video. So for all we know, there's a mini shuffle apparently on its way, but also apparently only 2 more people would have to sign a vote of no confidence for there to be a leadership challenge anyway. So whether or not Rishi Sunak even makes it to the next election as the Prime Minister, we'll wait and see, because I'm beginning to suspect, very curiously enough, is that even those within the Conservatives know fine well that retribution is going to be brutal and humiliating, because bear this in mind, ladies and gentlemen, they've had 14 years. How do you rationalise screwing up for 14 years and only furthering yourself when you're supposed to be bettering and levelling up the country? You can't rationalise that, ladies and gentlemen. It's completely indefensible.
Over the last number of years to provide enough childcare places for people, but also when it comes to a society where people have to decide whether they stay at home to raise their kids or they have to go out and work, and in many cases they have to go out and work because one salary is not enough, then the government have to do something about that. But it's easier just to say £100,000 a year isn't enough. I just think about it for a moment. How is it possible that the Prime Minister and his Chancellor can look at £100,000 a year and say, well, that's not enough money to live on, and wash their hands of the situation? Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks.
And by the way, in case you were wondering, we're not quite done. We're not quite done yet, because apparently this goes even further than just thinking that one person thinking that £100,000 isn't enough. It is those who are even beyond Jeremy Hunt in delusion. So let's just wait and see, ladies and gentlemen. But now I know what many of you are thinking of right now is that, well, Labour and Sir Keir Starmer, they won't get you any further on the property ladder. Well, you may think that, but do you think the Tories are going to help in any way except make things even harder? That's the thing I want people to seriously consider, is that you may say that Reform are going to save the day, but how can they do that? Because, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I've read their policies. There are things that, quite frankly, don't add up and don't make sense. And finally, well, £100,000 is by this time, in 10 years' time, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be having people say that £250,000 a year is not enough. That will be where we are at right now, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't draw the line about some things that should just never be said and some things that should just never be done. Because how on earth do you justify, rationalize, or condone that the very richest and those at the very top of the ladder, ladies and gentlemen, don't think they're high enough? And not just high enough in terms of what they earn, but high enough to differentiate themselves from those who are the most vulnerable in society. And with all that being said and done, I cannot wait to talk with you guys again next time. Take care, and bye-bye for now.